Bro, Andrew Wilson has to be stopped. Since this guy has gone mainstream, he's been on a generational run. He has been tearing it up. And I've said this in previous videos. This is going to be a conversation that the mainstream is going to have to deal with because there are a lot of young men that are growing up and they don't believe in egalitarianism. And the female right to vote is at threat. Regardless of if you believe that or not, the female right to vote, because of this argument that he's about to make right now, it's a very compelling argument, and I ask that you listen to it with pure logic. Take the emotional part out, look for consistencies and pure logic. Listen to this. This is a masterclass. Rarely ever do I watch an entire video before I react to it. Usually I'll watch 30 seconds to like a minute of it before I go, okay, this is a good enough video. I'm sure I have stuff to say about this topic. But this video drew me in so much that I watched the whole video. And today I was like, I have to react to this one.
So describe to me the America that you want. What does it look like? What are the...
You mean by tomorrow?
Well,
let's say I was king tomorrow?
Well, you seemed very keen on this idea, which I'm sure you're excited about. What I mean is, ultimately, you want to transform America into something that it used to be or that you'd like it to be or whatever. Let's not argue about that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's just say you want America to be a certain way. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, what does it look like once you've got to that destination, once you've got to that perfect America, which represents your values as someone who's really interested in Christianity being the dominant force in society? What can you do? What you can't? How is it different from what we have today?
So,
gotta get through it.
Would women be allowed to vote?
I mean, to at least the degree that men are, but I don't want men to vote for the most part either. I don't think it's a great idea.
But it would be equal between men and women in your view. Really? It doesn't sound like it. If you want a household, well, what I mean is, it sort of sounds like, well, forgive me if I'm misunderstanding this genuinely, you'd like people to get married and to vote as a household, which I imagine would kind of mean that the head of the family, which is the husband, would tend to decide that. And if a woman isn't married, presumably she wouldn't be getting a vote partly for that reason. Yeah. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, what's wrong with that system? Sounds great.
I'm just interested in exploring. Well, it sounds great to you. I'm just interested in...
The thing is like, it's really hard. It's really difficult. When people think of things like, what's the argument against this? This is an immutable character. How could you argue that women shouldn't be able to vote or that men shouldn't be able to vote? It's like, well, at our founding, they couldn't.
Yeah, so Andrew Wilson's, just for context, Andrew Wilson's perspective, this is part of what they skipped when they were speeding it up. Andrew Wilson's perspective, he has Christian morality, so he looks at things through the lens of Christian ethics, and he believes that for you to have the right in America to vote, you should have some type of skin in the game, whether that be you should be a landowner, a business owner, whether that be you should have some type of military service involved where people can earn the right to vote through a year or 2 years of military service and then they have the right to vote. But this whole idea that the moment you turn 18, you should have a say in the direction that the country goes, he believes that it's flawed because for the most part, a lot of people don't really have an invested interest. And when you have skin in the game, you have more of an invested interest. So in this particular conversation, they kind of honed in on specifically the female right to vote. But Andrew Wilson, like he said at the beginning, it isn't about just the female right to vote. It's mostly about just having skin in the game. And when it comes to part of the male responsibility, our responsibility to have to go to war and fight and die for the policies that we may put into place, well, then because we have that responsibility almost exclusively, well, then our vote should have more weight. So I just wanted to give context into the conversation before they dive deeper into it. And I'm going to try to control myself and use impulse control to not keep stopping this video. But let's go.
Not vote.
Got to lock in on this
founding, as you said yourself, you had slavery, right? So things do change over time.
Right.
Sure, but the thing is like...
Sometimes in a good direction.
Sure, and sometimes in a bad direction.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the thing is like, the idea that they had there was that most men couldn't vote. There was no universal suffrage for men, including slaves, right? For the most part, were men. And women couldn't vote because most people weren't allowed to vote. Now, women, the arguments against women voting are pretty simple. And the idea is landholdership and force, right? Can women utilize force in order to maintain land? The answer is no. Generally, that takes men. So the biggest... if you're looking at feminism, for instance, you had the anti-suffragettes and then the suffragettes. But the anti-suffragettes arguments were way better. The argument was pretty simple. It just
By the way, there were more anti-suffragettes than there were suffragettes, and the anti-suffragettes were the women that didn't want the right to vote. There were more women that didn't want the right to vote than there were women that wanted the right to vote.
Like this. You cannot erode or get rid of the patriarchy because you always have to appeal to it for your rights.
Yep.
And that's a fundamental truth. And since that's a fundamental truth, I've never seen a great reason why women should be able to vote. Because they can vote to send men to war that they themselves do not have to go fight. They are not beholden to the draft. Only men are. And they can say, well, you're not beholden to the draft, perhaps because you're too old for it. But you were beholden to the draft when you were not too old for it. So your time could have come.
Could you not flip this argument the other way around and say women are able to vote, men are able to vote on things that affect women that don't affect men?
Like?
Well, all kinds of things. For example, their right to vote. I mean, among other things. But, you know, things to do with sexual health, abortion, all kinds of things, right?
Well, I don't understand. Abortion does have to do with men.
Okay, fine. I mean, it does, but it has more to do with women because it affects them more directly. But lots of other things. I mean, men could pass a law that women have to wear a headscarf, for example, right? So our votes affect each other. Mm-hmm. That's not an argument to deny the other sex the vote.
Oh, I don't understand.
Your argument is women can vote to send men to war. And
no,
my
argument is it's called force doctrine. My argument reduces to this. If you always have to appeal to one sex for your rights, right? Then why are you being imbued with the responsibility of that at all? Because women have to appeal to men for their rights, and anytime men want to take rights away from women, they can, like that. And there's not a damn thing women can do about it. And if you want proof of that, let me show you half the world. Anytime, collectively, men say women have no rights, they don't have any.
Yeah, look at what happened in Afghanistan. The moment we left Afghanistan, it didn't matter how many women were allowed to go to school. When the men came into power, regardless of what their religious beliefs were, and they said that you are not allowed to go to school anymore, they weren't allowed to go to school. And this is where a lot of people get sensitive because they think to themselves, well, are you saying that men control women? And kinda, I guess, in a way, but I think it points more towards the benevolence of men, especially in Western cultures where that's not the case. Like, if men wanted to lock women up in cages, collectively, there's nothing that they could do about it. But the fact that that isn't the case shows that that's not what men want to do. The media and feminism will point men out to be these like violent criminals when really only 1% to 2% of men are actually violent criminals. And even when you deal with those violent criminals, you call well-to-do men in order to handle the situation for you. So I'd argue that this points towards the benevolence of men because most men, I think, and I'd argue that most men would actually rather fight and die so that their wife can have freedoms than there are men that want to lock women up in cages like the media and feminists point men out like to be those types of monsters. And then when you look at like innovations that exclusively benefit women that men have created that could even get us to this point, like modern contraceptives, feminine hygiene products that allow women to be able to work in the workforce, all of these different types of things, it actually goes to point more towards the benevolence of men in Western cultures or Western societies.
And that's that. And there's not a damn thing that they can do about it. So the idea that they can erode the patriarchy or remove the patriarchy or in some way get away from the patriarchy to be strong, independent women is nonsense. They're just always appealing to the benevolence of men.
Right.
Always. And so I don't even understand what the purpose is of the vote for women. What is it? We can literally, via force, take it whenever we want anyway. What is the point here?
And that's why I never understood why feminism demonizes men, because it teaches women to work against men and work in opposition to men when really women need men to enforce their will. And if men start refusing to enforce female will, nothing that they want in society is going to matter because there aren't going to be any men that are willing to do it for them. So, you know, it's kind of like biting the hand that feeds you in a way when you teach women to work in opposition to men when really they need men.
I would imagine the point is to include the voice of half the population, which is naturally set on different priorities to those of men. And since we live in a society which is half female, it would be worthwhile to include their perspective in how we make decisions.
Why does voting
because it affects them as much as it affects us.
Have you, let me ask you a question. Are you aware that in the United States, we abolished alcohol?
For a period of time. I've seen some movies about how that went.
Who got that amendment passed?
Mothers.
Women.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, no. If you want to have an argument about our disagreements
and in terms of the political process, getting an amendment passed is one of the hardest things to do. So the fact that women weren't allowed to vote in that time and they still got an amendment passed shows the power that women have always had, especially when it comes to moral high ground, even when they weren't allowed to vote.
how women choose to vote.
No.
There's not
they
much
couldn't vote.
Oh, I see. That's what you're saying. Okay.
They couldn't vote.
But
they still got that amendment passed.
Okay.
The idea that women did not have influence or do not have influence or don't have moral influence on society because they can't vote is stupid.
So what's wrong with formalizing that in the form of a vote?
Well, I just told you, the very idea that women, well, like, let's start with this. Do you want women to be able to get drafted in the military?
I personally don't, no.
Why?
Why? Because I've never really thought about it, but it's just an instinctive reaction, actually.
Bro, just say the thing. It's because they're weaker and they're not capable of fighting a war against men. It's very simple. Women are weaker than men, and they're not capable en masse of fighting a war against men. Now, you're going to point out that this is what people naturally do. They do the defensive thing where they point out the one outlier of the strong woman, but realistically speaking, as grown-ass adults, we all know through logic, through basic biology, that en masse women would not stand a chance in a war against men.
I'd have to think about the exact reason, but I just don't think combat is what men do. I guess it's a very simplistic way of saying it. And there'll be women who I can kick your ass, and there are women like that. Right?
Agreed. But not generally.
What I am not against women serving in the military if that's what they choose to do.
Yeah, but what about the draft though?
Yeah,
but I don't think they should be compelled to. No.
But men should.
I think in some circumstances, yes, like when the survival of the country is at stake.
So women get a privilege men don't get.
Sure. Why men get certain privileges?
But so why do they have equal rights? No, what privileges? Name a single privilege men get that women don't have access to.
And this is where you kill the feminist debate. Name a privilege, name a right that men have that women don't have, because the whole idea of feminism is to fight for rights, to fight for the equality of rights. Name one right that women have or that men have that women don't have. That's how you kill a feminist argument.
You mean legislative?
Anything. Like literally anything.
In life?
Any aspect, whether it be governmental, social, women have all the privilege.
All the privilege?
Oh, yeah. Hey, when the Titanic goes down, who gets on the lifeboat?
Yeah, but that's a very narrow context. Well, who dies in childbirth, right? Like, I mean, come on, we're different. And
almost no women die in childbirth anymore.
Well, some still do.
Sure. But I mean,
it
some
almost
people
never
die.
happens. I think the amount of women that die per year in childbirth or during childbirth in America due to modern medicine now is like 700. For context, the amount of men that die doing dirty, dangerous jobs to uphold the infrastructure of the country that we live in, you know, all the important jobs like the road work, logging, all of these dangerous jobs, is about 10,000 men a year, 5,000 to 10,000 men a year. So 700 women per year die for like child labor, and like 5,000 to 10,000 men die just doing like work jobs in America per year, just to give like kind of context and scale there.
I mean, there's probably more women that die in childbirth in America than people who die on the Titanic in the modern
is childbirth avoidable? You just don't have sex, right?
No, but what I'm saying is there are outcomes that are better for men in life and for women, and that's a fundamental difference between men and women.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm talking about privilege. What are can you give me any privilege at all that men have that women don't? Whereas I can give you tons of privileges that women have that men don't. That's what I'm asking.
Privilege. Well, I mean, the privilege concept outside the legislative framework is a difficult one.
Even inside of it. Yeah. I'm asking for both. Either.
Anything.
Any, in fact.
I don't have the data on all this stuff, but I would assume there are contexts in which men are more likely to be employed for a certain thing because they're more likely to be perceived as authoritative, as leaders, things like that. Although that has changed with the kind of woke agenda of the last 10 years.
And it works both ways. Like, for instance, preschool teachers.
Yeah.
I would assume that people would vastly prefer that their kid go to a woman, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So it seems like that privilege is striped across the board. So, like, what is the... Why is it that women get all of the equality, right, but also get all the privilege? That doesn't seem right to me. That seems like it's backwards. So like I'm still waiting to hear from anybody ever. What are these privileges men have over women versus what women have over men?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can go and you can be drafted, you can be sent off to war, right? And women can't, but they can vote to send you off to war. How is that not something which fundamentally needs to be addressed immediately?
Exactly.
That seems to me like it's completely lopsided, and it's giving one class of people a significant privilege over another.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that it's very interesting how for decades now there have been guys that have been shamed out of actually critically thinking about this issue. And he's absolutely right. Women do have rights that men don't have. And even when you look at rights like how he was trying to bring up like the right to abortion or like the importance of abortion, well, that's women having reproductive rights, but men don't, right? Like if I go get a woman pregnant, I can't sign a waiver that says I want a financial abortion. If that woman wants to force me to pay money through the state, I have to do that because men don't have reproductive rights. So if women get reproductive rights, but men don't get reproductive rights, that's still lopsided and not equal. Even though I'm not an abortion guy, I don't believe that it should happen. I believe if two people get together, they lay down and do the things that creates babies, they should both become responsible and deal with that situation as such. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying here is when it comes to reproductive rights, women have the ability to have abortions. Women have the ability to give the baby up for adoption at birth. But in no way or no type of context, if a man doesn't want to be a father and be responsible for laying down and having a kid, can he escape that responsibility, right? So even in the context of abortion or reproductive rights, it's not equal.
If we allowed women to be drafted, you'd be happy with them having the vote.
Well, see, now we come into pragmatic problems, though. The reason that you said earlier, I'm against women being drafted, is because they can't really serve in combat roles.
Right.
Only in support roles, which draftees of men would have to serve in combat roles. The reason women don't do well in combat roles is because, well, driving tanks is hard work. It takes muscles, and you gotta, run the shells, and you have to carry hundreds of pounds of equipment with you, and you have to do all of this type of thing. And generally speaking, women aren't equipped for it, which is why we've never had a female Navy SEAL to date, even though they've been trying for like 25 years. We still haven't had a single one. They can't do the job. Now, what people always do is point to outliers, right? Well, some women can do it. That's true. Some can, but in general, they can't.
I guess, but when you vote for a government, you don't vote whether to go for war or not. It's the government that makes the decision. There's plenty of people who voted for Donald Trump and are absolutely disgusted that he's started a war with Iran.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought government was force. We all agreed on that, right? Government's force. Like, ultimately, that's what it reduces to. So when you say you're voting for force, and you're voting for force use. Why does the United States have a massive military? Well, because we're going to use it. That's why we're going to use it. And why do we have a draft? Well, because we're going to use that too, and have used it. And so the thing is that a lot of what we're voting on is force.
So when you make a vote or when you see the right and the left kind of going at each other, trying to get the office, trying to have whoever reflects their values in the position of power of force. It's essentially two groups of people trying to vote for who has the mechanism of force to act within their will. So if the president is on the Democratic side, the reason why the Democrats want the president to be a Democrat is because they want the person who has the power of force to enact their will, whilst the Republicans, they want the president to be a Republican because they want the person who has all the power and force to act on their will.
We're trying to protect our nation from all foreign threats, right? That's why we have this massive military. That's why we have a draft. That's why we have the potential for mass combat. That's why we entered in World War II, right? It's why we entered, and there was a draft then. And we're going to institute a draft at some point again, likely. It's more likely than not at some point. We're going to do it. So the thing is like, why do women get exempt from that? And if it's the case that you don't want them exempt from that, why is it that they don't go right to the front lines then and battle it out? Like draftees have at least the potential to.
Like even in Germany, the young men are starting to have to get ready to register for the draft, and now they have to answer to the government if they want to leave the country for, I believe it's over 3 months. That's exclusively a responsibility of the men in Germany. Even in the Ukraine, while the men are dying in foxholes and fighting this war against Russia, Ukrainian women are able to travel the world and go be on expensive yachts and go party in different countries because they've already fled the country. And so the difference in responsibility should reflect the difference in authority when it comes to decisions being made. Because if one group of people gets to go be on a yacht while the war is being fought, while the other group of people has to die in the war, well, then there's something lopsided about them both having an equal say in what wars they're going to be fighting.
Well, that's a fundamental privilege that is not being addressed, right? And yet women have the vote. Doesn't seem like they care too much about men's rights, even though we're supposed to care about theirs. Seems like they have a lot of privilege in society.
Is that fair, Andrew? I think a lot of women care about men's rights, actually. Look, there's a vocal minority which say that they don't and they hate men. And look, we know those type of women. But let's be honest, a lot of women care about men's rights. They do.
Give me like 3 of the most prominent ones you can think of.
Who care about men's rights?
They care about men's rights when they're transgender or when they're gay. But outside of that, feminists, for the most part, fight for equality, but only when it benefits women. And I think that's the bigger issue. If feminists actually fought for equality when it came to, say, the family court system, the injustices that go on in there, when it comes to holding women responsible that are lying about egregious crimes like sexual assault or things like that. There have been so many cases recently of women just blatantly lying out of spite when it comes to rich or powerful, successful men. And when they look into these stories, these women are blatantly lying and there's almost no punishment for it. So if feminists were going to bat for the family court system or these types of injustices, it would make a lot more sense for them to say that they were fighting for equality. But the fact that they only acknowledge inequality when it benefits them just shows their actual motive. And it isn't about equality. It's about superiority, 110%. You've never seen a feminist arguing for male reproductive rights. If I get a woman pregnant, if she can have an abortion, I should be able to at the very least say, I don't want anything to do with this kid, sign a waiver, and have no financial responsibilities. If that was genuine equality, that's what it would look like, right? Genuine equality is no WNBA. Because that's inherently sexist. Why do women get their own league? We should have all the players, all of the best players in one league, and the WNBA would disappear. So it's like selective sexism and selective equality, but when it benefits women. Because having something like the WNBA is inherently sexist. That's literally what it is. It prohibits men from joining because they understand that there's a fundamental difference between men and women. And so he's going to have a hard time trying to figure out any woman that fights for male. What are you going to say, like Pearl? What is it like? What do you got, like Pearl and like Camellia Pangela? What's her name? Like Louis Perry? You got like a couple of ladies, but for the fact that I'm struggling to even name them just kind of answers the question in my opinion.
Well, I'm trying to think now, but
I mean, we've had feminists on the show who are feminists, like Louise Perry, for example. They're a different type of feminists to the idiots that you'd be spending your time arguing with, but the people who have a very sensible view of these things. There's lots of people like that. By the way, coming back, not to change subject, but coming back to your point, I mean, one of the things that doesn't make a lot of sense to me is...
not to change the subject and then change the subject.
For example, yes, it's true, men serve in combat roles and women don't, but women bear children and men don't. And there's a huge disadvantage in all sorts of societal outcomes from a materialistic career perspective to spending the time to bear the child and then to nurture that child, right? So
What? Like what?
Well,
that's backwards.
No, hold on.
Yeah.
The gender pay gap discussion, which is kind of stupid in a lot of
I don't even know
areas,
why he went
is
there.
actually a reflection of the fact that there is a motherhood gap in lifetime earnings. Which is
but if you look at the women under 30 in major cities, they're now making they're starting to make significantly more than men in their same age group. Look this up, by the way. And you'll never hear any of the feminists or the mainstream media talking about this, but women under the age of 30 currently make more money than men under the age of 30 in specific major cities. But you're never going to hear anybody screaming about equality because it's selective equality. It's equality, but only when it benefits women.
If you're a woman who bears children and then looks after them,
time off and that
you
type
take
of
time
thing.
off, then over the course of your life...
Less overtime.
You will earn less. So that would be one disadvantage that I could give you, where women contribute a different thing. So you might say, well, men get drafted, women carry children.
It's not a disadvantage.
What do you mean?
Oh, no. Oh, they have to stay at home. Oh, I don't raise their kids. Where's the disadvantage again? The man's in the...
Oh, no, the men get drafted. Where's the disadvantage?
They die.
Okay.
They get shot in the face.
Yeah, and women earn less money over the course of their lives and have to carry a thing
they
that
earn
is a
more.
risk to their life, potentially.
What they have instead is they now don't have to pay for daycare, and they can depend on somebody else's income, which is taking care of them.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh, my God. You get to stay at home, and you don't have to do anything except raise your kid. Wow. And by the way, they're putting their kids on a bus almost every morning to go to a public school. They don't even have them for 8 hours out of the day most of the time. So like, funny. How is this the most incredibly difficult job ever, or in some way requires them to have they're the ones who are privileged? You know, there's an old comedian who made this joke, and I agree with it. Any job you can do in your pajamas can't be that hard.
Bill Burr, favorite comedian of ours. But
okay.
Yeah, Bill has changed a lot since he got married. But either way, you can see the grasping for straws when he has to try to compare staying home and raising your own children to having to go fight and die in a war. And I think a lot of people don't understand this, but like I was saying earlier, the anti-suffragettes actually outnumbered the suffragettes, but the reason the suffragettes got so much momentum is because it actually wasn't a grassroots movement, feminism. It was actually funded by billion-dollar corporations. And the reason why these billion-dollar corporations were funding it was because they wanted more wage slaves. They wanted to flood the workforce, they wanted to stagnate wages, and they wanted to double the workforce so that they could have more disposable people to do the jobs that they needed to get done so they could grow their companies. It's very similar to how there's like a bunch of immigration because they want more people from other countries now to come in and fill in these positions. Now they're trying to get rid of people and to use AI. So by any means, these companies have always been willing to try to stagnate wages or to try to get advantage in the labor force. And by flooding it and making it so you doubled the workforce, essentially, you've stagnated the wages, and now you need a 2-parent household that's working in order to just afford a living. So if women withdrew from the workforce necessarily because of supply and demand, the demand would go up for workers and the pay would go up for workers. So women leaving the workforce would actually be beneficial to more women having the ability to stay home with their kids.
Can't be that hard.
He was joking, though, knowing Bill. And now that he's married with kids, I think his perspective's changed somewhat. But I guess, you know,
I'm married with kids.
Right. You're married. I mean, you watched your wife carry the baby or babies inside her for 9 months. Like, that's a big deal.
Sure.
So I guess that to me would be one example versus the hypothetical risk of once every 50 years you get drafted.
In a 2-income household, it's a privilege that women get to stay at home. It's a privilege.
110%, and there are so many women that have to work so hard, but they would love to stay home with their newborns. When a woman starts getting intentional smiles from an infant, many of them start folding and start to realize that there's something more important than just being in the workforce. And this is why you see the difference, especially when it comes to the wage gap later on in life. It's because many women decide that they want to be home with their kids eventually. And you know it's a privilege to be able to stay home and do exclusively that while your husband goes to work, because even if you did go to work, you'd still have to do it. Right? So to be able to just focus on that one thing is actually a privilege. It's not actually a burden. And there are a lot of feminists that will try to paint that as a burden, but yeah, they're your kids. It's your house. You should, it's a privilege to be able to stay home and focus on just that, for sure.
About staying
especially
at home.
In
We're talking
economy.
About carrying the child.
Yeah, but carrying the child has to be raised.
And most women in America then go back to work.
Yeah.
At a disadvantage, as we just
Well, that's not a disadvantage, though, right? They don't have to have children. You have to go out for a draft.
Well, women do have to have children for our society.
Well, they're not. So.
Well, I mean, they are.
I mean, they're definitely
Your wife is, my wife is.
Yeah, but what's the birth rate? We're under replacement level.
Yeah, for those who don't know, 2.1 births per family is how you sustain a society. So you got mom and dad, they replicate each other, 2.1 births per family, and then you can sustain the population of a society. 1.8 births per family, it takes 100 years to correct. 1.6 births per family, we've never seen in human history any society recover from that low of a birth rate at any point. We are currently at about 1.2 births per family. So that just goes to show you in terms of the female responsibility, if we're going to consider that to be something as important and as prominent as the male duty to fight and to be forced to go die in war, where then where are they holding up their end of the bargain if their contribution to society and their equal burden to men fighting and dying in war is childbirth, but obviously they're choosing not to do it because the birth rate is so low, right? Like, we are currently at catastrophic levels of population collapse, by the way. And this is something that people don't really care about because it takes time for you to see it, but it's coming down the pipeline. And in terms of like the things that you care about, prices, all of the infrastructure, all of this stuff starts to crumble. Then you get an aging population. So you have so many more people that are older that they have governmental power and they start to make you pay for Social Security. And so your financial burden towards Social Security becomes heavier. And so like these are things that are going to happen in the future that are coming down the pipeline because of where we are now. And if it's the female duty and responsibility to society to have kids, Well, they obviously aren't forced to do it like men are when it comes to war, because there ain't enough people doing it for sure.
You're talking about a side argument. What I'm saying is, in a society that wants to reproduce, men have to go to war and women have to bear the children.
That's true.
Yeah.
And so why don't we just say, well, the men go to war, the women have children, that's why they both
When are they going to start having the children part of this?
I mean, my wife's doing it.
Yeah, but
your wife's doing it, so shouldn't they have the right to vote? You're not fucking fighting war, are you?
Men, well,
nor am I.
But is there the potential for that through the draft?
Well, like just the potential for them to have children. You say they're not. Well, I could say you're not being drafted. Same thing.
No, you can't. There is no equivalency, and I can point out the distinction.
Yeah, the compulsion thing.
The compulsion, yes.
But for a society,
one is forced, meaning if I'm a man, my right to freedom could be taken away from me because I don't want to go fight in the war. I could be jailed or face a massive fine because the government forces men to do their duty, while women don't have the mechanism of force to do their duty. And this is where the feminists will panic and go, so you want to chain women up and make them have babies? And that's actually not the argument at all. The argument is more so leaning towards using propaganda, mechanisms of media. Instead of turning on the radio and hearing songs about sexual promiscuity, maybe you turn on the radio and hear wholesome songs about family. Instead of all the movies being like having these egregious sex scenes and promoting these degenerate things that are going to lead to the detriment of society, you start to have media that basically propagandizes people into striving towards family, and I think that's a smart idea. The mechanism of force doesn't have to be used when it comes to women in childbirth. Giving benefits to families who have children, these are things we need to start thinking of, because the people who are going out on a limb and continuing to have kids, even though most other people, or not most, but the birth rate is so low, so they're the ones kind of holding it all up, they should get certain privileges in society, and we need to be incentivizing people to have more kids.
Men have to go to war and women have to have kids.
I agree, but you need to get to the they're having kids part before you can tell me that there's some equivalency to men being drafted, because they're not having kids.
And you're not being drafted.
But I can be compelled because I've signed up for the draft. Where have they signed up to have kids?
I think this is a splitting hairs argument.
I think it's not.
Yes,
I think that the idea that my children can be drafted, or I could be drafted even at my age because perhaps I have knowledge which would be useful to the United States military. Yeah. They could do it in 5 seconds. They could bring me on. They in Ukraine, they draft 60-year-old men.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because once the numbers get low, the age gets, the gap just lengthens. Like, people are like, oh, well, you don't have to do it because you're over the age of 25 or whatever the age is right now. But it's like, yeah, but if the war continues and they need more people, who do you think is next? There's going to be 30 to 35. That's just how it goes.
They need you, they're going to take you. And you can peel potatoes or whatever it is they need, right? Women do not have to do that. They do not have to sign up for selective service. Yeah. They are not compelled and will never be compelled.
It's asymmetrical in that way.
They can avoid pregnancy, though, right? And if you're saying that they have a duty to have children.
I'm not saying they have a duty.
But do you have a duty to go fight a war if you get drafted?
Correct.
Oh, okay. And this is fair how? Where do we get to the fairness?
Well, not everything has to look exactly symmetrical, but you're...
Bingo. Conceded the argument. The argument started originally with the weight when it comes to the right to vote. Not everything has to look symmetrical, right? If it doesn't have to be symmetrical for men to have to be willing to go fight and die in wars, and women don't have the duty of child rearing, well, then why does it have to be symmetrical when it comes to who gets to vote in the policies that might send us to war? Right? So now he's pointing out the asymmetry. And the issue is humans live in an asymmetry because men and women are inherently different. And that's something that people haven't been willing to accept in the past 30 to 40 years. I don't know why, but somehow people have been convinced that men and women are ever going to be equal. And it can never really happen because men always have the authority of force. So women will always have to appeal to men to get the things they want done.
Your argument initially was, where's a privilege that men enjoy and women don't? Well, I would argue in a functioning society where we want to reproduce, women end up with the burden of childbearing and child rearing in a way that men don't. I think it's a fairly simple and obvious argument, right?
And yet they're privileged when it comes to custody and divorces. Yep. They're privileged when it comes to child support. They're privileged when it comes to alimony. They're privileged when it comes to all of these things.
92% of all alimony is paid from male to female, even though we've seen a rise of women in the workforce. So even though women are making more money than ever, still to this day, 92% of all alimony is paid from male to female.
Every advantage when it comes to having the child. And so it's like,
It's
no.
a different argument. Now, what I'm saying is the burden of bearing the child is uniquely with women in the same way that the burden of fighting in war is uniquely with men.
No, the comparison here would be the burden to have to go to work every single day and sacrifice your life force for a paycheck in order to provide a life for your family. I think that would be closer to the equivalent of a woman having to stay home and bear children and all these other things.
So it's an
especially because nowadays, especially because when you look at the statistics, being in the workforce is actually more dangerous than having children at this time because of modern medicine, which I'm grateful for. But at the same time, it just shows you the difference in terms of the burdens.
logical argument. The nature of woman is to have children, nature of men is to go to war.
Right. And so
Then the woman needs to be fulfilling her nature then, right?
Well, my woman is, and so is yours,
Yes,
right?
but most
So
women
I would
aren't.
insist for my woman to have the right to vote on that
Anecdotal.
basis.
He's leaning
and
on
she's
anecdotal
contributing, frankly, at this
evidence.
point, way more than I am.
Drafting's collective, right?
Yeah.
So then the duty's collective.
Yeah.
Then why isn't childbirth?
I don't understand. You're saying for women to have the right to vote, they must have a duty to bear children.
Yeah. Well, if you're saying that there's a duty for men to go to war, and you're saying that the reason that they do is because that's their ontological nature, and the ontological nature of women is to have children, okay, I can concede that argument. But we just ran into a problem then, because if one is collective and then the other is collective, why do I have to fulfill my duty, but they don't have to fulfill theirs?
Well, I never said that I thought it was a collective duty for women to have children. It's
But it's a collective duty for men to go.
yeah.
Well, then again, that sounds like privilege.
Yeah, in the same way that fire safety in your own house is a personal thing that you do, but if there's a fire in the neighborhood, it's the collective duty of the neighbors to get together and try and put it out, right? There's a different, something can
Do
be...
you go to jail if you don't do that?
Yeah, look, I agree with you. The compulsion element is different.
Yeah.
But not everything is exactly the same.
I'm not
That's
even
the whole
asking, like, I agree with you. Getting drafted and having babies is different. We can agree with that,
Yeah.
right?
Both important, though, right? For
Both
society.
important. But the idea here that we are talking about, which should be equal, is the idea of duty.
Yep.
If we're talking about the compellence of you, if your country drafted you, even if you're in terrible shape, and they told you, look, we're in a collective war effort and we need you, and you're going to come in here and just cook food because our soldiers need food, right? Are you going to go do it?
I'd do it voluntarily, to be honest, but yeah.
You would do it.
I wouldn't
Okay.
be very useful, but yeah.
Now,
Terrible cook, terrible
now
soldier.
you're compelled to do that.
Right?
And part of your duty and honor is that you have to go do it.
Sure.
Right.
I agree with this, okay? But if we have a compelling duty that men have an ontological function, only men can do this, therefore they should, why does that duty not apply the other way?
Only
That
women
to me
can
is
have kids.
inconsistent, and it's a hole in the worldview. It makes no sense to me.
I agree with you, it's inconsistent, but that's because the acts are not equivalent. Like, not everything is the same. I think in order for the defense of the realm, so to speak, you'll have to compel all the men to fight in certain very
Where
rare
do those men come
circumstances.
from?
Women. Right.
So then one duty's being fulfilled.
No, I'm all with you in terms of we
Cook
need
it.
a high birth rate.
He
I
has to be
just don't think
stopped.
duty is the way to get there. Anyway, we've
Wait, couldn't you just, I'll just wrap with this.
Yeah,
So,
it's
okay,
just-
but
it's
couldn't
a time
you,
thing.
when you say duty,
yeah.
can't you instill the ideas of duty and honor even absent legislation
Mm-hmm.
through propaganda, things
Probably
like that?
the best way to
Those are
do
the
it.
routes that I would be more apt to move towards.
Well, yeah, to be honest with you, man, this is the thing is like, actually, a lot of this discourse, I think, is misguided because the vast majority of women actually do want to have kids, but there are
They're not.
circumstances in their life which make them less likely to do so.
I agree.
And so if we, I mean, you made this point yourself, there are countries, they're not having as many results as people would like to think, unfortunately, places like Hungary. But I think the way to get people to have more kids is to get obstacles out of their way, not to compel them through the draft system. Like, here's your ticket, have 2 kids. You know what I mean? I don't think that's going to work.
That's
but
not
it
the
seems we
argument,
agree on
though.
that. Anyway, Andrew, it's been great having you on.
You too, guys. I really appreciated the combo.
Going
Really good. I enjoyed this because they trigger nometry. I respect them so much for being able to sit down and have a conversation about a tough topic without getting too emotional. And the fact that I even seen some of this guy's stuff. I believe his name is Constantine, and he's a very bright guy, too, when it comes to certain topics. I enjoy some of his commentary. He got absolutely wrecked, but I think it's because he's never really thought about this type of topic like most people haven't. But what I've been saying in the past is that the mainstream is going to have to get used to having this conversation and this debate, and they're going to have to come up with a strong, compelling argument for why this is wrong, because this is coming down the pipeline. I've said this before. The boomers, they got to enjoy the sexual revolution. Then after that, they got to be capitalists during peak capitalism. They're still in all the positions of power. But once they're gone, there's going to be a generation of men who are on TikTok who see women having conversations about a man versus a bear. They see these new statistics that have just come out in 2026 saying that only 34% of women have a positive view of men. So then why would I go fight and die for a war, in a country where 70% of the people sending me to the war, or 70% of the women that are voting for the policies that are sending me to war, don't even like men? And then they're seeing like these results of divorce and family court systems. All of these different things are going to compile, and these are the arguments that are going to start to happen. I know for some people this is a very sensitive topic. This is a hard one to stomach, but either way, I mean, it is what it is. Let me know in the comments below if this video is a W or L, and give me the HBO special. I hope brother out special, the like and the subscribe button for more content. Till next time.